Hero Wanted. By Melinda Curtis. Chapter 1. I'd been invited to my ex-husband's wedding. A week before the wedding, no less. Leah Martin consolidated bouquets of daffodils in her Sea Glass Bay market stall and considered her options regarding the unexpected invitation. Eat a cookie and bring a hot date. Leah glanced at Marisol, her booth companion, and tugged on the waist ties of her work apron. Did I say that out loud? You did. Marisol, the middle-aged dynamo, waved a cellophane-wrapped, green-frosted seahorse cookie until she caught the attention of a passing family. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat bun that showed every smile line on her cheerful face. You often say what you're thinking. You probably also talk in your sleep. Not that anyone is next to me to hear at night. Leah sighed, glancing around the booth set up on the sidewalk, and then the porch in front of her flower shop. Both needed sweeping. She breathed in the soft scent of roses and tried to channel the peace of a rose garden. Marisol made a sale of the daffodil bouquet and gave the two kids each a cookie. I can hear you. And while we have a lull, I wanted to thank you for letting me cook in your flower shop kitchen. You're good company. Leah meant it. When Marisol had wandered into the flower girl's shop several weeks ago, she'd struck up a long conversation. And because Marisol was new to town, and Leah ran the small-town florist shop all by herself, they drifted to the back room where Leah could work on some bouquets that had been ordered and watch her 4-year-old son Owen play in his corner of the shop. And then, before Leah realized what was happening, Marisol was making cookies in the store's small kitchenette and charming both Leah and Owen. The upbeat widow had been coming back to make cookies every day since. I wish my sons agreed with you. Marisol arranged the last of her cookies in a basket. She used those cookies as an excuse to strike up conversation. They insisted I move here after Paolo died, and yet they don't want to spend any time with me. Those 4 boys. They don't want me cramping their style in their kitchen or with the ladies. Her 4 sons ran Tank's Bar and Grill, which was located on the other side of the alley behind the flower girl. It was a popular hangout with singles, be they locals or tourists. Marisol harumphed. Those boys need to settle down and give me some grandbabies. Those boys were in their 30s and enjoying the bachelor life too much to think about settling down. Everyone in town knew it. Everyone except Marisol. Leah sold a few more bouquets. Meanwhile, Marisol delighted her customers with free cookies. The bell in town square began to ring, signaling the close of Sea Glass Bay's market in the historic district, and the start of happy hour at many local restaurants. You're welcome to use my little kitchen anytime you want, Marisol. Leah began folding tables and transferring flowers from outside to the refrigerated case inside the flower girl. Around them, other vendors were doing the same. Soon, the street would reopen to traffic. Soon, Leah would join 3 of her closest friends for a glass of wine at the tipsy table. Maybe her friends could tell her what to do about that wedding invite. I saved cookies for Owen and his friend Lindy. Think about finding that hot date. Marisol set 2 orange starfish cookies on the table. And then she carried her basket of cookies out to the street, approaching the smattering of remaining shoppers. See you tomorrow. A few minutes and a few last-minute sales later, and Leah had locked up the flower girl and was heading toward the artsy classes and creations booth to pick up Owen. The hands-on craft booth for kids was run by her friend Claire Bishop, who had a seemingly endless supply of energy when it came to kids. There were only 2 kids left in the booth, her Owen and Lindy, the later belonging to another hard-working parent, Claire's boyfriend, Sully Vaughn. Both kids wore full-length craft aprons and happy smiles. Leah carried 3 daffodil and daisy bouquets. She set one on a table for Claire. What a busy day. You're not kidding. Claire was cleaning Owen's hands and face with a wet wipe. Her strawberry blonde hair lifted in the light ocean breeze. She smiled when she saw Leah. We just finished finger painting. Mommy, I made a rainbow for you. Owen grinned. There was green paint streaked through his dark blonde hair and a smudge of red that Claire had missed on his cheek. His apron looked as if he'd wiped his paint-covered hands on it at some point. All the colors had blended into a murky black. And tomorrow we're gonna make sparkle flowers. Glitter on paper cups with pipe cleaner stems. Claire informed Leah. I'm sure the glue monster will make an appearance. She raised her hands on either side of her face and curled her fingers in and out like flexing claws. Who likes the glue monster? Oh. Me. Lindy's little hand shot up. And me. Owen's followed. Is the glue monster single? Leah teased. Maybe I can take him to Charlie's wedding. Mommy, the glue monster is our sticky hands. Owen mimicked Claire's finger curls. And then he ran to one of her supply tubs. I'll show you. No, not today. Claire laughed, cutting Owen off at the pass. We're closing up and cleaning up now, remember? Owen nodded, hand caressing the plastic tub as if he couldn't quite let go of the idea of the glue monster. I helped clean up, Lindy said brightly, hovering near Claire, who she adored. She was 2 years older than Owen and a big help with the little ones, according to Claire, who'd only recently begun dating Lindy's father. It's always good to have helpers. Leah gave Owen and Lindy their starfish cookies, in response to which they hooped. These are for after dinner. That statement dulled their excitement somewhat. Can I have my rainbow picture, Miss Claire? Owen pointed to where a colorful finger painting was hanging on the drying board. I want to give it to Mommy. Sure. Claire went to unclip it. Just be careful. It's not quite dry. And neither, it seemed, was Owen's craft apron. While watching Claire, he'd ran his hands up and down his apron front, and now his hands were paint-stained once more. Hey, buddy. Charlie approached the booth. He wore black khakis, a black polo, a disapproving frown, and his fiancée's manicured hand possessively on his arm. Why don't you give your rainbow picture to Mommy Ashley? A small voice inside Leah cried out in protest. I love rainbows. Ashley smiled. Her lipstick was perfect. It hadn't been chewed off after a long day of work. Her bright yellow dress hung perfectly over her slender Pilates instructor frame. She had a pedicure and a manicure and a man. None of which Leah had time for. And if she was being honest with herself, she didn't begrudge her Charlie either. He'd never been happy to let Leah shine. Owen frowned at his father. I don't want Mommy Ashley to have my rainbow. Mommy puts my pictures on the refrigerator. Mommy Ashley puts them in the trash. Leah stifled a laugh and thought, I owe that boy an ice cream. Charlie frowned. Oh, baby bear. Ashley looked aghast, running forward in her impractical heels and her too short yellow dress, bending her knees to embrace Owen, who was still wearing his stained crafting apron. Before Leah or Claire could warn her, Ashley had swept Owen into her arms and stood. I adore rainbows. And I adore you. Oh, Leah and Claire said at the same time, spotting the damage to Ashley's dress before she did. Dark handprints on her shoulders and a black stain to her bodice. Ashley glanced down and gasped, practically dropping Owen to the ground, which was the wrong move to make since it caused a black paint streak from her ribcage to her hem. My dress. Mommy Ashley, you look like a bee. Owen smiled, and then made a buzzing sound. While Ashley assessed the damage and Charlie made sympathetic noises, Claire and Leah burst into action. Claire wiped Owen's hands clean again. And then Leah carefully removed his apron, stuffing it into a plastic bag Claire gave her. Mommy Ashley is a pretty bee. Owen buzzed some more. This is Italian silk, Ashley whispered mournfully, staring down at her ruined dress. It's okay, babe. I'll get you a new dress. Charlie frowned at Leah. Come along, Owen. Oh. Leah glanced down at her little one. I thought you were picking him up at 6 tonight at my place. Ashley wanted to pick Owen up early to try on his tuxedo for the wedding, and then we're having dinner with the caterer, Charlie said in that superior tone of his. You should be able to keep him clean, you know. Leah wanted to say, he's a boy. But that sounded sexist. She considered saying, dirt has a way of finding him. But that seemed inappropriate. Instead, Leah smiled and took Owen's hand, giving it a squeeze. Good explorers show it at the end of the day, don't they, buddy? It was what she told him every night when he shed his smudged and stained clothing. Yup. Owen beamed up at her. Explorers don't get dirty sticking flowers in water for their mother's hobby, Charlie muttered. But crafty explorers do, Claire said staunchly. Who's doing the flowers for your wedding? A professional we found elsewhere. Charlie smirked. Leah, do you have a date for the wedding? Ashley had snuck up behind Leah, the same way she'd snuck up on her ex-husband during their marriage, quietly and with her cleavage on display. I need to let the caterer know the final head count. Of course, Leah has a date. Claire jumped into Leah's rescue, despite Leah not having dated in the 2 years since her divorce. He's hot. Is he on fire? Owen asked, wide-eyed. Mommy shouldn't touch him if he's hot. Somehow, I don't think your mom's at risk of being burned, Charlie said in a haughty voice. And Leah wanted to slug him. She'd been raised with 3 brothers, who taught her to fight her own battles. But her mother had always counseled her to use her words instead of her fists. And with Charlie, Leah found it hard to jab back in any way. Why did he have to be such a jerk? Wasn't it enough that he'd lied when he'd promised to love her forever? Did he have to take every opportunity to make her feel small? Oh, Leah's date is hot. Claire kept on championing Leah's cause. And Leah's touching him. Wait until you see them together. They sizzle. Claire licked her finger and then touched her hip with it, making a sizzling noise. Charlie and Ashley turned their gazes toward Leah. Leah's cheeks were heating. She should have told them that Claire was joking. But they stared at her as if the idea of Leah dating a hot guy was impossible. Ashley even rested her hand on one hip, as if she were incredulous. And suddenly, Leah wasn't embarrassed. She was mad. How dare they think she wasn't woman enough to date a hot guy? He's smokin' hot. Oh my God. What is wrong with me? I'll be careful not to get burned, Owen, Leah added quickly before her son could express his concern. She collected the rest of his artwork from his bin beneath the back table and then his rainbow painting from Claire. You guys probably need to leave if Ashley's going to change. Otherwise, you won't keep to your schedule. And Ashley loved her schedules. She's right, Ashley said, holding her dress away from her. I saw a cute little dress in the window of Splendiferous. Let's just run in there and see if they have it in my size. All right, baby. Charlie lifted Owen into his arms, and then the couple walked off without so much as a goodbye. Bye, honey. Leah called after Owen, waving. Bye, Mommy. Owen tilted his body away from Charlie, waving both hands. I don't know how you can be so nice to them. Claire commenced packing up her art supplies with the help of Lindy, who was softly singing a song about a bumblebee while stacking yarn skeins in a plastic tub. I have to be nice for Owen's sake. But that didn't mean their snobbery didn't hurt. I shouldn't have told them I had a hot date. Oh, yes, you should have. Claire snapped a lid on a storage bin. They only gave you an invitation last week. And only because Owen is the ring bearer, and they want you to keep him out of trouble so they can pretend to be the perfect couple on their perfect day. Well, there is that. Leah folded an easel. But I want Owen to have a good time. You deserve a good time too. You need a hot date, Claire said in low tones, in case little Lindy was paying more attention to their conversation than the sorting of yarn skeins. Can you find me someone hot enough to impress Ashley but who's not my type? Leah's cheeks were heating again. I'm too busy for romance. I know someone hot. Claire waggled her brows suggestively. Someone sure to make Ashley respect you and Charlie to see you with new eyes. Hey, ladies. Sully, Lindy's father, arrived with a large wagon to load Claire's craft supplies. He was a hard-working member of the community, wiry and handsome, and quick with an encouraging word. "Dad." Lindy practically flew into Sully's arms and began telling him about her day. "He's a gem," Leah whispered. "Isn't he, though?" Claire whispered back with a private smile. "I have a gem in mind for you, too. I'm going to have this hot guy meet you at Rigatoni's tonight at 6. I'll tell him you'll be carrying a daisy." She plucked one out of the bouquet Leah had brought her and handed it to Leah, who recoiled. "I don't do blind dates. Nobody in Sea Glass Bay should. The town is too small. And everyone knew everyone else, if not personally then at least by reputation. This blind date scheme could be worse than showing up at Charlie and Ashley's wedding solo." Claire sked. "When you say you don't do blind dates, I hear that you haven't done blind dates. Time to try something new." "No. Please, no." Leah broke down one of Claire's folding tables. "The least you can do is let me ask." Claire helped Leah carry the table to Sully's wagon. "Go on to the tipsy table without me." "I don't know what you two are cooking up," Sully said, giving them a dazzling smile while holding Lindy, "but it worries me." "Don't worry about us." Claire had a winning smile of her own for her man. "When we're done packing up, I need to run a quick errand before meeting you at the tipsy table." Am I really going to let her set me up on a blind date? The alternative was to go to Charlie's wedding dateless. So yes. Yes, she was. Didn't stop her from experiencing a moment of panic. Leah grabbed Claire's arm. "Don't tell anyone about this, not even Jazzy and Paige. I'd die of embarrassment. And be sure to tell this guy that I'm gorgeous, smart, and funny," Claire finished for her, "because you are." "Do you think so?" Leah laughed. "Suddenly, I want to date you." The tipsy table had the advantage over other bars and restaurants of having outdoor seating that overlooked a small playground, which worked great when Leah had Owen with her. Though they usually gathered there on Sundays for their weekly wine and wine session, Paige and Claire had cornered Leah in her booth at the start of the day, convincing her that they should go clothes shopping instead as their market wind-down treat for the week. They knew she was dragging her feet on picking an outfit for a wedding she didn't want to go to, let alone dress for, so they'd moved their wine get-together up one night. Leah sat down at a table with Paige and Jazzy and explained that Claire was going to be late. The daffodil bouquets she brought for her friends lay in the table's center, trying to be cheerful. Leah wasn't sure if Claire could pull off a blind date in such a short time frame, but if she did, Leah was going to have to run home and change out of her jeans and purple flower girl t-shirt. "We waited to order until you showed up." Jazzy rocked an adorable little baby in her arms. "Jeremiah can't make it today." Her significant other. Her new significant other. "We know how picky you are about your wine," Paige added, drinking water and watching Sully push Lindy on a swing. They planned to join the group later when Claire arrived. Paige pushed a lock of short auburn hair behind her ear. "You say that like picky is a bad thing." Leah tried not to be offended. "At least I'm not high maintenance like Mommy Ashley," she air-quoted. They all groaned as if pained, which reminded Leah, "Jazzy, how is your stomach? Pesky parasite gone now?" Jazzy grimaced a little, readjusting Caleb in her arms. "Yes, the antibiotics are doing their thing, thankfully." Claire leaned forward in her seat, concern showing. "Should you even be here? It's only been a few days since the hospital, and we would have understood if." Jazzy waved her off. "This is the only time I've been out since I got home, and it will only be for an hour or so. Besides, I bailed on our wine and wine session last week to have dinner with Lauren." She beamed. "And then there is Jeremiah, he has been absolutely amazing, looking after Caleb while I recovered. It helps to have a hot guy around. Although, I have to admit, I'm not bouncing back as quickly as I would have, like, say, in my 20s. Why does it feel like guys stay in their prime, smoking hot, long after women do?" It's the price of having babies. Or mothering everyone around us. It ages us. We were all hot in our prime, Leah said with a low chuckle, reaching forward to stroke the black hair on Caleb's head. We're on fire now, Paige said unconvincingly, making Jazzy and Leah laugh. Hey, we are. Or at least, Jazzy and Claire are. They have men. She sighed. Give over that baby, Jazzy, before I talk myself into the pathetic zone. Jazzy transferred Caleb to Paige's arms. Staring at the baby made Leah long for another child. She'd come from a large family and had always assumed she'd have several children of her own. Can we just agree that we're well-aged, Leah suggested, smiling warmly at her friends, despite being unable to forget Claire was setting up a blind date for her this very minute. The intimidation factor of a date with a hot man was making her palms clammy. We're aged like fine wine. Speaking of which, it's time to order. Let's order Claire her Syrah. I'm going to have a white wine blend. She waved to their waiter as a bee flew past. Oh, my gosh. I almost forgot. You won't believe what happened to Ashley this afternoon. Chapter 2. Business always picked up at Tank's Bar and Grill as the weekend market in the town's historic center wound down. Hank DeLeon came out of the office to help his brothers with the sudden rush. But before he reached the host station, Charlie Martin flagged him down. He held a young boy on his hip and a purposeful look in his eye. Hank. I set up a meeting with the owner of the buildings across the alley. Bill might be interested in hearing your offer to lease that space we talked about. He glanced around as if concerned someone might be listening. The florist space? It was the perfect size for his mother to open a small restaurant, and the perfect place to keep her under his watchful eye. Fantastic. A frown passed quickly over Charlie's face and he cast another furtive glance around the bar. Yes, the lease is coming up for renewal, or reassignment, next month. I'll send you the details. He left, holding open the front door for Hank's mother. She carried a basket of cookies and passed them out to the waiting customers with a broad smile. Where did she get those cookies? Hank forgot about helping the host seat the peak rush of customers and met her mid-restaurant, taking her arm. Where have you been? I tried to call you several times today and you didn't pick up. Mama patted his hand and gently but firmly freed herself, sashaying toward the kitchen. You know I don't turn on my phone unless I want to call someone Henry. She was the only one who called Hank by his given name. Hank tossed his hands, looking around the bar and restaurant for his brothers, who were already converging on him. But what if we want to call you? Roman had followed Mama from the hostess station. You can't just wander around town without telling us where you're going. Dad always knew where you were. Emilio came from behind the bar. Their brother Sebastian came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a white dish towel. What if something happened to one of us? Mama stopped and faced them. Your father always knew where I was because we ran a restaurant together. But he didn't need to know where I was every minute of every day. If something were to happen to me, I'd turn on the cell phone. And if something were to happen to one of you, I'd know it, and I'd call. She turned her back on them and marched into the kitchen. The four DeLeon brothers looked at each other, shaking their heads. Standing together, Hank was reminded of how alike they were in appearance, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair, and their father's strong chin, which was apparently no match for their mother's stubborn streak. I told you not to let her take that apartment in the Sea Glass Bay retirement home. Sebastian snapped Hank's arm with his dish towel before returning to the kitchen. Or let her keep her car. Emilio poked Hank's shoulder with the point of one knuckle, and then headed to the bar. Some head of the family you've become. She should have moved in with you. Roman gave Hank a disparaging look before heading back to the hostess station. Then you wouldn't snap at us all the time. Hank ran a hand over his goatee, mumbling to himself, Dad wanted us to watch out for her. I didn't think it'd be this time-consuming. He'd thought it'd be simple to set her up in a small restaurant that only served lunch. That would allow her to participate in the retirement home's activities in the afternoon. And then one of her sons would dutifully see she was safely tucked away in her apartment every night. It was the vision their father had for her. A vision he hadn't yet told her about. A plan Hank was finding hard to execute. Most of the time he had no idea where she was. And Roman was right. Since her move here, all Hank seemed to do was snap at everyone. So much for the best laid plans. Mama popped out of the kitchen. "You're not pushing today's special enough, Henry." Clearly, she'd taken inventory of the kitchen with her usual efficiency, one learned from running a restaurant with their father for 40 years. Hank held up a hand in her direction. "Mama, it's a bar more than a restaurant. I'm not going to push breakfast for dinner just because you made a new friend and purchased 8 dozen eggs. I know a thing or two about the hospitality business." Mama swatted his hand down. "You have to mix up the menu regularly, so your customers find you interesting. Which means having daily specials, and it also means you've got to push the special until it's gone to cover costs. I don't know how you boys have stayed in business so long without me. We're more a bar than a restaurant, Mama." He didn't know how many times he'd told her that. "If you serve food, you're a restaurant." She flounced back toward the kitchen. Hank leaned against the bar and gestured to Emilio to give him a shot of whiskey. He'd moved to Sea Glass Bay 5 years ago when he got out of the army and purchased the bar. It was far enough away from Reading that his folks couldn't interfere, but close enough that he could get home in a day if needed. Sebastian had been a Navy cook and had shown up during the first year Hank was open. The kitchen was his domain, and he was struggling to share it with their mother. When Emilio was done serving in the Marines, he'd come to tend bar, working the taps with Hank on the busiest nights of the week, or holding up the fort when Tank had to disappear into the office to handle all the owner-related upkeep of the business. He had the patience of a saint and could listen to customers talk for hours. And when Roman had enough of the Air Force, he'd also landed in the Bay, as the older locals called their Northern California town. He was the pretty brother, and as the face of Tanks, he was a good magnet to draw a crowd. But Hank was finding that 5 De Leons were too many for one establishment. He needed to find Mama a place of her own. Emilio. A slender curly blonde, or was she a very light redhead? Hurried up to the bar. Curiously, she had a smear of dark brown paint on her shirt sleeve. "What time do you get off work? I have a huge favor to ask." "I'm off at 6, Claire." Emilio handed Hank a filled shot glass. "Don't tell me you need help moving classrooms again. Or loading your car with bricks for some art project. Or anything to do with heavy lifting." Hank recognized the woman now. She'd helped Emilio pour drinks at an outdoor event they'd held last summer. He downed his shot, letting the alcohol burn away his frustration over managing his wayward mother. "There's no heavy lifting involved with this favor." Claire sat on a bar stool and extended her arms across the gleaming mahogany surface, hands reaching toward Emilio. "My friend needs a date tonight." Emilio drew back, shaking his head. "I don't do blind dates." "Oh, this is going to be good." Hank grinned. Claire scoffed. "What a coincidence." "She doesn't either." Arms still on the bar, she made a gimme gesture with her hands. "Come on, Emilio. You owe me. Remember that time I pretended to be your girlfriend last summer when that blonde wouldn't stop hitting on you?" Hank chuckled. He remembered. Emilio continued shaking his head. The reddish blonde straightened in her seat, not taking no for an answer. "This won't be a hardship. Leah is gorgeous, smart, and funny." Leah. Hank cast about his mental contacts file. Since opening the bar, Hank wasn't much for networking or socializing, unlike his date-happy brothers. He couldn't put a face to the name. "Come on. What's wrong with her?" Again, Emilio shook his head. "Gorgeous, smart, and funny women don't need blind dates. She works all the time and never has a chance to meet anyone." Claire clasped her hands together. "Please." Hank moved behind the bar to rinse his empty shot glass. Leah? The flower girl shop owner? Mama had come out of the kitchen and was barging in on the conversation. She's adorable. Emilio, you must go. Yes. Claire grinned at Emilio, tossing her hair over her shoulder. See? She's Marisol approved. Leah was the flower girl shop owner? Hank would love to know if she were open to relocating so that Mama could open a small restaurant in her space. Be a good boy and go. Mama came to stand next to Emilio, putting an arm over his shoulders and giving him a gentle shake. Emilio knew he was trapped and immediately capitulated, although he didn't look happy. Of course, Mama. Fantastic. Leah will be at Rigatoni's at 6 and carrying a single daisy. Claire slid off the barstool and hurried toward the door. You owe me, Emilio called after her. No, Claire was adamant. Now we're even. Mama returned to the kitchen while Emilio took a few drink orders and Hank thought about this opportunity to talk to Leah. Charlie was the realtor advising Hank in his search for a small restaurant space for his mother, but Hank preferred to gather his information from a more direct source. Hey. Hank moved next to his brother. You've already put in a long day. I'll meet Leah during my dinner break. You? Emilio didn't look up from the 2 Moscow mules he was making. You don't date either. Hank drew up short. It's not a date. What are you up to? Emilio's hands stilled. He gave Hank an inquisitive look. Nothing. Hank walked away. And if I was up to something, it'd be none of your business. Worst idea ever, Leah mumbled to herself from her seat in Rigatoni's. Every time the restaurant door opened, Leah smiled and sat up straighter. The flowered, blue jersey sheath she'd chosen to wear with a white sweater was increasingly feeling like it was too casual for the white tablecloth establishment. It was now 6:15, her back was beginning to ache, and it was looking more likely that Claire had been unable to find Leah a date. She got out her cell phone and texted Claire, "My date is late." Claire immediately replied, "But he's worth the wait." She added a smiling emoji holding a rose between his teeth. Okay. So at least she wasn't being stood up. Excuse me. A deep voice. A big hand dragging a chair back. A tall man. Leah's eyes kept going up. Over the black button-down shirt that covered broad shoulders. Over the black goatee, the straight nose, short black hair, and cool dark eyes that were just as unabashedly assessing her. He was one of the De Leon brothers who ran Tank's Bar and Grill. But which one? Him not being a native of Sea Glass Bay and she not being nosy, Leah didn't know. What would Marisol say if she knew they were on a date? Leah didn't know. She squared her shoulders, wondered if she'd bitten her lipstick off, and flashed her De Leon date a smile, along with the daisy. Did Claire send you? He nodded, sitting down and leaning back in his chair as if he needed distance to assess her. I'm Hank. Hank. Henry, as his mother called him. He was the oldest De Leon and the owner of Tanks. Leah introduced herself. She couldn't stop staring at him because he wasn't exactly what she'd ordered. Sexiness exuded from every pore, but it wasn't a turn-off. At least, not on her part. Hank was the kind of suave, arrogant man who'd never date her for real. Hank would date women who carried name-brand accessories, had regular manicures, and put sophisticated highlights in their hair. They'd be high maintenance, but he wouldn't put much effort toward maintaining them. Why should he? Rumor had it that women hung out at the bar for a chance to date a De Leon man. Was it a rumor? Hank's presence here seemed to indicate it was. Best get down to business first, in case Hank wasn't going to go along with the wedding date idea. I don't know how much Claire told you, but we'll start with drinks. Hank signaled their waiter. I'll have a glass of your best Cabernet. And the lady, his cool gaze sent hot waves over Leah. She'll have a Moscato. Too sweet. Leah grimaced. I'll have the Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. She'd seen it featured on the menu's wine list. The waiter disappeared. You know wine? Hank quirked those dark eyebrows. Yes, arrogant was an apt descriptor. Hot, too. Speaking of which. It was hot in the restaurant. Leah would have flapped the ends of her sweater if it didn't give away that Hank was the source of the heat. If she didn't get a grip on her self-esteem, she was at risk of melting into a puddle at his feet. She cleared her throat. Hey, not only do I know wine, but I know how to change a flat tire, too. Leah tapped her thumb against her chest, where her heart was currently beating an oh my he's sexy, fast-paced cadence. Divorced single moms need to learn how to take care of themselves. You're prickly. He stroked his goatee and Leah could just imagine those dark whiskers scraping across the sensitive skin beneath her ear. What is happening to me? You need the Moscato. A little sweetness smooths away the edges. He tried to signal for the waiter. Leah's mouth dropped open and the impact of all that sexiness fell to the black and white checkerboard tile at her feet. Please don't change my drink order. You'll thank me later. She bristled. Her ex never listened to her either. I think not. Leah reached across the table and captured his raised hand, drawing it down between them and somehow tangling her fingers with his. They fit, those fingers, even if Hank's attitude didn't fit with hers. And it was that incongruency that slowed everything down until it was as if she and Hank were alone. And holding hands. And staring into each other's eyes over a romantic candle flame. In his eyes, she swore she saw surprise, along with another flare of heat. I want to kiss him. Leah swallowed, still caught in that dark gaze. I am in so much trouble. Hank loosened his hold and shifted his grip, cradling her fingers in his. You aren't what I expected. What was she supposed to say to that? Leah inched her hand free, and with each inch her cheeks grew hotter. Their wine glasses arrived. Hank raised his Cabernet toward her. To the unexpected. Please, no. I hate surprises. Leah cast about for a better toast. To not making a fool of myself. She clinked her glass with his and drank. The wine was cool and refreshing, exactly what Leah needed to reboot this date. She set her wine down on the white tablecloth, prepared to tell Hank exactly why he'd been asked to meet her. There would be no other dinners before or after Charlie's wedding. But Hank was already signaling the waiter to return. We'll start with Caesar salads and then have the linguine with clams. Leah's ire grew. You're ordering for me? Yes. It's what Latin men do on dates. Hank sipped his wine as the waiter hurried off, studying her over the rim of his glass. Rigatoni's is known for their clam dishes. If you look around, half the customers have ordered it. If you're allergic to shellfish, we can change your order. I think you'll like the risotto. Being Latin was no excuse for being presumptuous and rude. Do you know what gives me an adverse reaction? He shrugged. How would I know? We've only just met. Leah drew a calming breath. I don't like being told what to do or what I should like or how I should run my business. Hello, unresolved issues with her ex. Leah tried to soften her words with a smile. Hank tilted his wine glass toward her. Who's been telling you how to run your business? My ex-husband for one. Why had she told Hank that? She crumpled the cloth napkin in her lap. That's not the point. The point is. And what does he say to get your hackles up? That I have too much unused space in my flower shop. Leah loosened her grip on her napkin. He doesn't understand me or my dreams. You like elbow room, Hank surmised, again with that superior voice that should have grated on her nerves. After all, Charlie spoke the same way. Except he didn't, she realized. Charlie's contempt and tone were meant to demean. Hank's was just a reflection of his self-assuredness. If you must know Hank, I have plans to expand, plus I like my location. Leah sat back in her chair, trying to relax or at least appear so. How, exactly, did we start this personal conversation? We ordered wine, Hank said simply. I was wrong. The Sauvignon Blanc is taking the edge off your temper nicely. I like my edges. I mean, what was this man doing to her? Leah sipped her wine. Everyone says I'm very nice. If anything, the wine didn't soften my edges, it gave me some. She rarely talked back to anyone, including Charlie. You don't like your wine? He glanced around for the waiter. Her hand instinctively went to his slowly rising arm. This time, her palm covered the back of his hand and brought it gently down to the table. My wine is fine. Do you always have conversations like this? His brow clouded. About wine? All the time. I run a bar. The waiter approached with salads and a bread bowl. Leah drew her hand back. I'm not sure we're talking about the same things. But we are. Hank settled his gaze with more certainty on her. You have the space to expand your business, but you haven't yet, which means that you either lack the capital or the courage to do so. We're definitely not talking about the same things. They weren't even on the same wavelength. Perhaps it was time to steer a course to safer waters. Are you a sports fan? No, he dug into his salad. Is that the direction you want to move your business in? No, I was just trying to make polite conversation. She took a healthy sip of wine. Did Claire tell you why I wanted to meet with you? No. Good, I mean, it's just a date. The more time she spent with Hank, the more convinced she was that he wasn't the right man to take to Charlie's wedding. Which left her back at square one. Chapter 3. You should take a day off, Sully Vaughn told Leah early Sunday morning as he dropped off a special order of teapot vases, which he set on her workbench in the back room. You work 7 days a week. Smiling, Leah opened the box to make sure none of the merchandise had been damaged during shipment, but it all seemed packed well. She tightened the ties of her work apron. Isn't that the pot calling the kettle black? Maybe. Sully chuckled before taking the back steps to his truck. Although, I can't say I'm a workaholic now that I'm dating Claire and I have a personal life. With a friendly wave, he was gone. I have a life, Leah grumbled to herself. What would Sully say if he knew she had gone on a date last night? Whatever he thought, he'd have had the wrong impression. The service at Rigatoni's had been efficient. Leah had managed to keep the conversation rolling and had avoided touching Hank a third time. There'd been a disagreement when the bill arrived. She'd wanted to pay or at least go Dutch. Hank would have none of it. And so, she'd ended their date while he settled up the bill, scurrying out the door before having to deal with him wanting to walk her home and facing a worse fate, that awkward moment where the date ends and it's a should-I/shouldn't I game regarding a goodnight kiss. She was convinced that she shouldn't kiss on a first date, even if there'd been enough sparks when they touched to set off a 4th of July fireworks display. The last thing I need is to date a guy just because he's sexy. Leah brought several bunches of flowers from her cooler, preparing to make Mother's Day-themed bouquets for the teapots. The nerve of Hank to think I lack the courage to expand my business. She drew a deep breath, letting the sweet mix of floral aromas calm her. She glanced around the workroom, which was divided into 4 different spaces. A walk-in refrigerated unit, 2 work tables, a small kitchenette, and Owen's corner with his sand table, blue beanbag chair, and toys. She'd like to hire another florist, at least part-time. And she'd like to grow plants for sale. But while Owen was young, his need for space was her priority. Or it was when he wasn't staying with Charlie, as he was now. I have courage. And a strong work ethic. Leah set about preparing the teapots to be filled with short arrangements. She set oasis foam bricks inside, and then began cutting filler flowers and foliage to height. And I don't show up for a date with a woman intending to put her in her place. Did I come at a bad time? Marisol poked her head in the back door. She had on a flowing magenta blouse and a black skirt. If you need a few more minutes to talk to yourself about a bad date, she blinked and entered without finishing her sentence. You can always talk to me. Vent. Go on. Talk to Marisol about dating her oldest son? Not in this lifetime. I was just rehashing a show I watched on Netflix last night, Leah improvised. Single moms who own flower shops don't have time to date. Rules, rules, rules. Marisol sked and set down a cloth grocery bag on the kitchen counter. Love is like a wildflower. It needs a little sunshine to bloom. You don't need to read up on the rules of growing for that. And it may come as a surprise to you, Leah, but you won't find sunshine in this workshop. I'll get plenty of sunshine when the market opens in. Leah glanced at the time on her camera lock screen. Oh, less than an hour. I better get moving. She snipped off stems and stuck flowers in teapots. Plenty of sunshine but no blooms, Marisol said in that mothering way of hers, gentle but knowing. I'll give you blooms. Leah stuck a floral pick that said Happy Mother's Day into the center of a small arrangement in a white and pink striped teapot. And then she brought it over to Marisol. Cappuccino roses, lavender snapdragons, and pink Gerber daisies. That'll bring a little sunshine to anyone's day, just like you bring sunshine into mine. No male de Leon needed. Do you know what this could use? Marisol admired Leah's work, smiling. A trio of wedding cookies tied to the handle. It needs a home on your shelf, Leah said firmly, in your home. Nonsense. Marisol unloaded her groceries from her bag. I get enough enjoyment from working around beauty. I don't need to bring any home. Fine, but I left you an envelope on the counter to reimburse you for the cookies you gave away yesterday with my flowers. I don't want. Please don't argue. It's what I would have paid a supplier for them. Marisol frowned at the envelope. I can't keep letting you contribute to my business like it's a charity, Leah said softly, turning the teapot and moving it to the back corner of the counter so that Marisol could enjoy it, but it was out of her way. She tucked the envelope beneath it. Do you remember the first day I wandered in here? Marisol's gaze sought Leah's. Her dark eyes were filled with unshed tears. I was lost and looking for something. I didn't know what. But you talked to me as if you'd known me forever. And little Owen ran to greet me as if we were family. And I felt as if I'd found that something that had been missing since Paolo died. She took the envelope and stared at it. You didn't blink when I asked to bake cookies here. You didn't blink when I suggested cookies would help sell your flowers. And you shouldn't blink when I give this money back to you. She held out the envelope. I don't come here out of charity for you. I come here because you welcomed me into a community and introduced me to your friends in the farmer's market. I come here because you make me feel at home and not a burden. It was Leah who was blinking back tears now. She accepted the envelope and gave a small nod. Okay. Yes. Marisol sniffed. All will be okay. With a bit of sunshine, a few blooms, and a trio of wedding cookies. A few hours and many bouquet arrangements later, as Leah was setting up for the market, Jazzy popped by, her baby strapped to a carrier on her chest. Leah tickled his little toes, earning a tentative smile in return. You're looking healthy enough to tackle the world again. I woke up today with no pain, not even a dull ache in my stomach. I feel so much better. And I swear, that baby gets cuter every day. I think so, too. But I'm biased. Jazzy shook her head, sending dark curls swinging. Hey, I had an idea last night. We're at separate street entrances of the market strip. I was thinking that I could feature some of your live plants in my booth, outside my shop, and you might display some of my sea glass crafts in yours. That way we could double our sale potential. Jazzy collected sea glass from the beach that had given the town its name and made art from it. She tilted her head and smiled coyly. Pretty please. Of course. Leah grabbed the now empty teapot box and filled it with live plants in various decorative planters. I'll carry these over and you can give me some stuff to bring back. There's a flower girl tag with the price on each plant. I have hooks on the patio, so some of your blue-green wind chimes would be perfect. She headed to the front. Marisol, I'll be right back. Jazzy and Leah hurried down the steps and over to Jazzy's booth toward the other end of the market strip. With a bit of rearranging, the plants found new display homes. It's funny how plants make my booth seem more inviting, Jazzy noted, rubbing Caleb's back. It breaks up the fragile displays of your exquisite artwork, Leah agreed. Although I still wouldn't let Owen in here unsupervised. Mommy. Owen ran up to Leah, who swept him into her arms. He smelled like syrup and boy. Speak of the devil, Jazzy said softly. Leah grinned and hugged her son tighter. Did you miss me, Pumpkin? Yep. His little arms wound around her neck. And Marisol's cookies. Charlie and Ashley stood at the entrance to Leah's outdoor booth. Ashley drifted to Paige's booth, where she sold a variety of aromatherapy candles. Charlie waved Leah over. She set Owen down. Hang out with Miss Jazzy for a minute, Pumpkin. Okay. Owen reached for Jazzy's hand. Charlie wasted no time when Leah reached him. Ashley and I have been talking. We don't approve of Owen being raised in a flower shop. Leah gritted her teeth. Would you like to pay for his full-time preschool tuition? She footed the bill for afternoon sessions. Charlie pressed his lips together. I thought not. Leah returned to Jazzy's booth and picked up Owen, kneading her son in her arms. Did you have a good time, Pumpkin? Leah asked in a voice that felt like it had sharp edges. She was reminded of Hank's heated gaze and softened her voice. I missed you so much. Owen sighed and rested his head on her shoulder. He always returned a little pensive from visits with his father. Leah hated that. Marisol made those little white cookies you love so much. Leah set Owen's feet on the sidewalk, kneeling to tie one of his blue sneakers. Why don't you run back to the shop and ask for one? He pulled at the blonde cowlick on his crown, fighting back a smile. Can I have two? What a charmer he was going to be. Leah tipped her head from side to side. You'll have to ask Marisol. If it was up to Leah, he might get three. Marisol. Owen raced off in that endearing toddler gait of his, more arms swing than fast legs. Marisol. Leah's heart swelled with joyful regret. It seemed like just yesterday that Owen had taken his first steps. You better watch out, Jazzy. They grow up before you know it. And things change without warning, like Charlie's request for a divorce and the unexpected invitation to his wedding. That's what they say. Are you okay? Jazzy asked softly, having filled the teapot box with some of her sea glass work for Leah to take back. You look a little worried. Leah forced a smile. Oh, you know. It's Charlie's wedding. I hate to go alone. But she was going to anyway. Jazzy nodded. I guess the new Mrs. Martin doesn't want a 4-year-old running around her fancy-schmancy wedding reception without supervision. You've got that right. And since it's being held on a seaside cliff, I don't trust Charlie's parents to watch Owen. They weren't exactly hands-on grandparents. You need a man. From his carrier, Caleb cooed his agreement. A capable, successful man. Leah picked up the box with sea glass. Know of any? Jazzy's expression turned mischievous. I have one in mind. Can I set you up? Leah hesitated. She really didn't want to go to Charlie's wedding alone. And it couldn't be as bad as her first blind date, could it? Okay. Really? Jazzy's eyes widened. Leah chuckled. You don't have to sound so surprised. I didn't take you for the adventurous type. Jazzy held up a hand. I mean, until recently, I'd given up on love. I thought we were in the same camp. I'm not looking for love, Leah said matter-of-factly. I'm looking for a +1. All right, then. Jazzy grinned. I'll text you the details, but I don't know if I can make it happen for a few days. You don't have to explain. I understand. But, can this just be our secret? I know I shouldn't feel embarrassed about this, but if word got back to Charlie. Enough said. My lips are sealed. When Leah had finished setting up Jazzy's windshield display, she went inside her shop. Marisol had given Owen 3 wedding cookies and a glass of milk in a green sippy cup. "Did you tell Jazzy about your date?" Marisol sounded hurt at the possibility. "No." Leah cleaned up her workstation, sweeping discarded leaves and stems into the trash. "Did you get burned, Mommy?" Owen's mouth was rimmed with powdered sugar. "Miss Claire said you were seeing a hot man." Marisol's amused gaze met Leah's. "No, pumpkin. I didn't get burned." But Leah's cheeks heated all the same. She turned away, wiping down the work table. "I want to hear about that fire." Marisol stirred batter in a bowl. About her son? Not on Leah's life. A change of subject was long overdue. "What are you making?" "You've done 4 dozen wedding cookies already." "Polverons." Marisol tipped her head, smiling the way she did when she was excited about baking. "Which are just sugar cookies with food coloring, but they're meant to lift the spirits. Bright cookies. Bright flowers. You're right. All that color will brighten up anyone's mood." Marisol stopped stirring. "Your husband's marriage is soon. Did you find an escort last night on your hot date?" "First off, he's my ex-husband." As if Leah could forget. "And second, I should be strong enough to go solo." Bad move. Marisol went back to stirring her batter. "You should show up at the wedding with a strong man by your side. Someone your husband will measure himself against and maybe be a bit jealous of." Marisol. Leah glanced at Owen, but he was playing with his superhero figurines and making battle noises. "I'm a widow, but I'm still a woman," Marisol said with sass. "You have more class than that couple. You should let the world know it." "Show the world," Leah laughed, "by toting around a handsome man?" "Yes. And wearing a revenge dress that tells everyone what a fool your husband was to let you go." Marisol ran a hand from her shoulder to her thigh, as if showing off that revenge dress. The idea appealed in theory. It was the execution that was tripping Leah up in the man department. "Doesn't a revenge dress imply that I care what my ex-husband thinks?" Marisol sked. "A dress like that with a better man at your side means you're over him and don't care what anyone thinks." Good thing she'd already planned on going dress shopping with the girls that night. "I guess I need a revenge dress." After the market ended, Leah found herself at Splendiferous with her friends shopping for something too hot for you to wear to Charlie's wedding. She sat in a chair with Owen on her lap while everyone searched for the right dress. "This one?" Marisol held up a floor-length mauve dress with heavy beading over the bodice. "It's very classy." Matronly, Paige whispered from her seat next to Leah, adding in a louder voice. "She has nice legs. She should show them off." "You're right." Marisol nodded. "I should buy this dress. I can wear it on Trudy's birthday cruise coming up." Paige nodded. Trudy was her aunt. "You'd look good in that on the dance floor." Jazzy appeared from behind a rack, pushing Caleb in his stroller with one hand. With the other, she held up a red cocktail dress with spaghetti straps. "How about this? I'd feel more confident if the dress was bra-friendly." Leah's comment earned a double take from Owen. She covered his ears. "Girl talk, pumpkin. I found this one on the clearance rack." Claire held a gauzy white dress up to her shoulders. "Does it come with a slip?" Leah asked, hand still over Owen's ears. "Or a full-body pair of Spanx?" Because it was too revealing. And too white. She was not going to be the bride, so she was sure as hell not going to dress like one. There's a world of difference between getting a revenge dress and being vengeful. The later was not her style. "What about that dress in the window?" Paige got up and went to find Maddie, who owned the shop, while the others went to the store window. Leah stood, settling Owen on her hip, and joined them. "It looks expensive." "Revenge dresses don't come cheap," Marisol said, the mauve evening gown slung over her arm. Claire put her hand under the hem. "It's not sheer, like the white dress. And it's sleeveless, but you can wear a bra, Jazzy noted. Maddie wound her way through the racks toward them. I'll give you the friends and family discount. She'll take it, Paige said. Mama, are you trying to sneak out the back door? Hank looked up from an email Charlie had sent him with an appointment request to talk terms on the lease to the Flower Girl shop. He'd been crunching numbers all Monday afternoon, trying to find a lease amount that made sense for Mama. Like his so-called date with Leah, the numbers were fluid and could mean success or failure. He'd asked Sully about her when he brought a special delivery of whiskey. Leah had a reputation as being kind-hearted and easygoing. All she'd done during dinner was block his questions. And then she'd tried to pay for dinner. Hank respected women, but his father had been a stickler about how they should be treated, like queens. He liked women who let him be in charge. He sighed. He should only be thinking about Leah in terms of what it might cost to buy her out of her lease. But thinking about Leah didn't change the fact that Mama was trying to sneak past him. His office was between the kitchen and the back door. Mama? Where are you going? Out. His mother backed up, returning to view. She had her hands behind her back. What have you got behind you? Tamales. There was a mutinous tone in her voice as she swung the bag around. I thought you were making tamales for the special tonight. He narrowed his gaze. Are you giving those away? What happened to managing inventory to maximize profits? I made extra. I'm having a potluck dinner with my friends from the apartment complex. The retirement home, he muttered disparagingly. At the rates they charged, they should keep his mother occupied and at home every day. Don't call it that, Henry. Mama shook a finger at him. I'm not over the hill. But you are, currently, retired. His father's life insurance policy and the sale of their restaurant in Reading enabled her to live as she pleased. He just didn't want her to be roped into someone's scheme and taken for all she was worth. She'd once invested $1,000 with a door-to-door scammer. Her daily disappearances were worrisome. Mama scoffed. I'm retired, but not to a rocking chair. The back door was flung open. Hey Marisol. I was taking a shortcut from my shop and thought I'd come in since I have a minute. I'm looking for Roman. A woman appeared in Hank's doorway. She had black curly hair, an infectious smile, and wore a carrier with a baby strapped to her front. I have a surprise for Roman. She captured her little one's feet in her hands and held them up, as if the baby was Roman's surprise. Hank's mouth dropped open. Had Roman? Was she? Was that baby? Roman? Roman's out front, Jazzy. Mama pointed the baby mama in the direction of Hank's younger brother. Jazzy continued down the hall toward the restaurant proper. Are you sure that was wise? Hank bumped the corner of his desk in his haste to follow Jazzy. Mama trailed behind him, clutching those tamales to her chest as if he might take them away from her. When did you become such a busybody? When I became the head of this family. Hank hadn't thought about it before, but it was true. He was the oldest De Leon now. It was his job to watch out for everyone. Not just Mama, but his brothers, too. She's got a baby. Aren't you worried? Or curious? About Jazzy? Mama laughed. No. If you spent more time with your downtown neighbors, you wouldn't worry either. They reached the bar in a spot where Hank was close enough to listen and far enough away to pretend he wasn't. Mid-afternoon business was slow. He set his elbows on the bar top, ignoring Emilio's questioning look. You aren't fooling anyone, Mijo. Mama rolled her eyes. Hank held up a hand, requesting silence. Roman. Jazzy flagged his brother down at the host station. Surprise. I need a favor. Jazzy, you and favors are no surprise. Roman smiled easily at Jazzy as if he wasn't responsible for the precious tyke in her carrier. You always need something. Hank drew a relieved breath. Emilio went to check on a couple drinking on the outside patio. I have this friend, Jazzy began, hooking her thumbs in her carrier straps. And she has an event coming up that she needs a date for. Someone sexy, Mama murmured next to Hank. Roman is perfect. You say that like Roman is your only son with sex appeal, Hank grumbled. I have an active social life, Jazzy, Roman was saying. I don't need to be set up or offered for pity dates. Mama gasped. That boy needs to work on his manners. Hank was experiencing a moment of déjà vu, like the other night when Claire had asked Emilio if he'd meet Leah for dinner. This isn't a pity date. Jazzy huffed. Leah has a lot going for her. But she's super busy with Mother's Day coming up and she really needs some eye candy at this event. Leah. Hank relived that jolt of awareness sparked by Leah's touch. That was quickly followed by a wave of heat he attributed to misplaced jealousy. He didn't want Roman to take Leah out. He didn't want Roman to touch Leah's hand and feel a bolt of attraction. And he definitely didn't want Roman to kiss Leah, because he'd been consumed with curiosity about how her lips would taste. What happened when Emilio met Leah for dinner? Did he say? Mama whispered, trying to push past Hank, but he set his arm in her path. I tried to ask, and Leah implied the date was a dud. A dud? Far from it. You shouldn't ask about your grown son's dates. Why not? Mama demanded, although in a whisper because they were both still half listening to Jazzy and Roman's exchange. Because you might not like what you hear, Hank whispered back. She frowned. Jazzy, Roman warned. Now Roman, we both know you have superpowers when it comes to the opposite sex. I'm just asking you to use them for good for once. Jazzy grinned. Leah needs a date to make her ex feel inadequate. You should be flattered. I immediately thought of you, Anne. Leah has a revenge dress, Mama muttered, distracting Hank from hearing the details Jazzy went into. Low-cut cleavage. High-cut hem. Midnight as a star-studded romantic evening. Hank glanced down at his mother. If your grandkids could see you now. I don't have any grandkids. Mama put her nose in the air. Meanwhile, Roman had agreed to meet with Leah. My love and leave brother is taking Leah out. Hank's hands fisted. Sweet. Jazzy high-fived Roman. Meet Leah at the Cliff House tonight at 6:30 to work out the details for this weekend. I'll text her that you're coming. She's blonde and she'll be carrying a daisy. In her teeth? Roman chuckled. Hank rapped his knuckles on the bar top as Jazzy headed back their way. Hey. Hank stepped into her path. Jazzy, is it? You should add some mystery to that date. Don't tell Leah who she's meeting. Oh. That's brilliant. Jazzy grinned at Hank, who felt like a jerk for suggesting such a thing, but a plan was forming in his head. He let Jazzy pass, barely registering that his mother was exiting with her. And then he walked over to Roman to tell him there was no need to plan on dinner at the Cliff House. Hank was taking his place. Chapter 4. The Cliff House was a fancy steak and seafood restaurant perched on a seaside cliff. Leah sat at a table near a window overlooking the ocean. Her chair faced the front of the restaurant, but the setting sun was making her squint and she couldn't make out who was entering. With Owen once again with his father, she'd gone the whole 9 yards for this date, straightening her hair, shaving her legs, and donning a green dress with white that made her feel sexy without being out for revenge level. She'd ordered a glass of Meritage to take the edge off her nerves and was holding up her daisy like a wand during an incantation, trying to be noticeable without holding up a sign that said, "Your blind date is over here." A man stepped out of the glare, stopping at her table. She squinted up at him, able only to discern his outline, tall in height, broad in the shoulders, the impression of a dark suit jacket over a white shirt. I see you're already taking the edge off. A familiar voice. It couldn't be. Leah shielded her eyes and was finally able to make out short, dark hair, a black goatee, and a superior smile. Hank? A server lowered the blinds on her window, bringing the man into focus. Leah drew a deep breath. Shoo. I'm meeting someone. And it wouldn't look good for her date to see Hank with her. Yes. You're meeting me. Hank bent over and kissed her. She knew as soon as their lips met that it would be marvelous. I should be shocked. She kissed him back. How could she not? This was one of those rare Twilight Zone moments where caution was thrown to the wind because all too quickly the kiss would end. He'd leave. And her world would never be the same. The kiss ended. Leah felt herself droop like a rose that had experienced full bloom. Hank sat down across from her, a triumphant smile on his handsome face. Jazzy sent me. Oh. Leah reached for her wine, but before she could raise her glass for a fortifying gulp, Hank covered her hand with his. Zing! She gasped. Hank's smile broadened. You feel it too, don't you? And then his hand lifted from hers. But instead of retreating into his own space, Hank extended his arm and brushed the back of his knuckles over her cheek. Bazinga! They both sat back in their seats. Leah forgot about her wine. She forgot about Charlie's wedding. She forgot about special orders from the local greenhouse and the floral supply warehouse. But what she couldn't forget was the drop-dead gorgeous man who'd kissed her. This makes no sense, she said finally. Why not? Because I'm a single mom and you're one of the De Leon brothers. Her hands rolled around in front of her chest. You guys date visiting models and college girls on spring break. Hank's eyes sparkled. I think you have me confused with my brother, Roman. I'm too busy to date. Leah shook her head. That's my line. Why would you want to date me? Because you're gorgeous, smart, and funny. Everything Claire said. The attributes she'd promised to tell Leah's date. He nodded. I remember my lines. They're well rehearsed. But he'd kissed her as if they were going off script. Claire may have told me, but I believe all 3 words apply to you. Hank shook his head. Why don't we start over? I'm Hank, a transplant to Sea Glass Bay and former Army vet. Thank you for your service. Could they start over? If they did, would he ask for a do-over kiss? She drew a deep breath. I'm Leah. Born and raised here, although my parents retired to Nevada. A waiter approached. I'll have a Napa Cabernet, Hank said, without looking at the wine list. I'm a red wine drinker in restaurants, he said to Leah. But not picky about the red. It took me 5 minutes to decide on my wine. She shook her head. You know, we have nothing in common. Except elemental chemistry and the drive to work hard. Hank stroked his goatee, which only sparked Leah's imagination about how those whiskers might feel against her skin. We both like linguine with clams. And wine. And I appreciate the beauty of a flower. You seem more like the exotic flower type. The way she imagined he dated more exotic women. She put her daisy in the small vase on their table. It was overshadowed by the single red rose the restaurant had put there. Why did you come tonight? Our last date was awkward. I couldn't stop thinking about you. He gave a little shrug. And when the opportunity presented itself again, I thought it was kismet. She sighed, staring out at the ocean, aware that Hank was staring at her. I like your mother. You know her? His brow furrowed. Yes. She. The waiter delivered Hank's wine. Like hers, his wine came in a small carafe. The waiter poured a sample in a glass for Hank to approve. Hank took his time evaluating, staring, sniffing, sipping. Had he assessed her the same way? Let's toast to uncovering layers, Hank suggested, unaware of her doubts. Uncovering? Leah's heart pounded. She wasn't the type to jump into bed with a man just because he made her remember she was a woman. Uncovering, his smile was gentle and reassured. Layers of our personalities, of our lives, of our hearts, she murmured. Rather than answer, Hank raised his glass and tilted it toward hers. The moment felt heavy with significance. If she toasted, she was committed to revealing pieces of her life, committed to disclosing thoughts and feelings she kept under lock and key in order to make sense of the attraction between them. Her glass tapped against his, almost of its own volition. "I'm a workaholic," Hank admitted. From a long line of workaholics. My parents ran a restaurant for years. We were raised to chip in if we saw something that needed doing. A table bust, water glasses refilled, tickets that needed cashing out. "Do you resent your parents?" Leah asked, although she couldn't imagine anyone resenting Marisol. "I only ask because I'm raising my son in a florist shop." "Worried he'll resent you later in life?" Hank was perceptive. His gaze caressed her face as intimately as a touch. If she wasn't careful, he'd uncover all her secrets. "Yes. I don't resent my parents." He swirled his wine, staring into its depths. "I mean, I wish they might have been able to watch more of my high school baseball games. But I understand why they couldn't. Tanks is my place. I get twitchy when I'm not there, so I'm always there." "I know." She nodded. "I never turn down an order, even if I know it means Owen and I will get home late. At least, you have your brothers to rely on. They don't feel the same way I do about it. They're employees, after all. Which makes you feel like you carry the most responsibility." "Yes. And here you thought we had nothing in common." He extended his glass for another toast. "To overachievers who have problems delegating." "I'll drink to that." She sipped her wine, letting the layers of flavor sink into her awareness the way the layers Hank was revealing did. She liked him. But knowing we're similar just means one thing. "What's that?" He leaned forward, dark eyes sparkling. "We're not cut out for a long-term relationship." Hank wanted to refute her statement. Instead, he made light of it. "We'll have to focus on the short term then. Your date makers hinted that you need an escort for an event coming up." Leah nodded. "I need a +1. You wouldn't happen to own a tuxedo, would you?" "I have the next best thing, my army dress uniform. I don't just haul it out of my closet for any occasion." "You'll need a special dress. My friends helped me pick one out yesterday." Leah chuckled. He liked the sound of her laughter, along with her quick wit and warm kiss. And then he heard a familiar laugh, his mother's. He turned around, searching for Mama. "I thought she said she was going to a potluck." "Excuse me." He stood, intent upon finding her. He followed the sound of laughter to the far side of the restaurant. Mama sat at a table with 5 other people, a mix of men and women her age. The man across from her had brightly dyed black hair and a threadbare blue button-down. There must be a new definition of potluck. Hank smiled, but it felt more like a grimace. He held on to that expression through introductions and his mother's dirty looks. "Now that you've all met my son, let's wave goodbye." Mama tugged on Hank's shirt sleeve until he bent over to allow her to whisper in his ear. "Run along. Don't ruin this for me." "Ruin it for you?" Hank straightened. "Be home by 9. I'll be waiting." That gave the table a fit of giggles. Hank walked stiffly back to Leah's table. "Everything all right?" Leah asked, looking uncertain. He didn't want her to doubt the feeling that might grow between them. "It's not you. It's me," she cut him off. "No. It's my mother," Hank began, more tightly wounded than he'd been in a long time. "She's too trusting. She's here and sitting with a man who looks like he could use a handout. I'm wondering if that's who she's been spending all her time with." Laughter emanated from across the restaurant once more. Hank's shoulders bunched. A warm hand came to rest on Hank's forearm, Leah's. "She'll be fine. Trust her." "How can you say that?" Hank frowned. "She's probably going to offer to pay for their dinners. The way you offered to pay for mine?" Leah rubbed his arm. He wasn't ready to receive comfort. This was an urgent situation. She's been swindled before. I worry about her being taken advantage of and overspending. When Mama moved here, we went over her budget together. Since then, she's gone over her grocery budget. Twice. You know she bakes for the community, Leah said quietly, sitting back in her seat and crossing her arms. That's got to stop. She's on a fixed income. And he wanted her to open a small restaurant. She has to think about her future and stop handing out food to charity cases. You don't understand her or see Glass Bay or me. Leah shook her head, gathering her purse. We don't have as much in common as you think. She set 2 20s on the table. You're leaving? He stood, perplexed. And paying? Yes. Why don't you join your mother for dinner? If you give her friends a chance, you might not worry so much about her judgment. Leah hesitated, gaze dropping briefly to his mouth before she pressed her lips together and marched toward the door. Hank was torn on many fronts. He wanted to go after Leah. He let her go. He wanted to join his mother for dinner. He sat and drank his wine, watching the ocean, thinking about what he should do next. Chapter 5. The morning after his visit to Cliff House, Hank was up early. He parked his truck outside Mama's retirement complex, ready to follow her. He had to know what she did with her days and who she spent her time with. Mama was mobile by 9 a.m., driving through the complex gates. He followed her to the grocery store. Hank texted his brothers while he waited for her to emerge. Does anyone know what Mama does all day? Emilio was the first to respond. I hope she's making friends. Hank sighed. Emilio was no help. Sebastian replied next. She always smells of sugar and cinnamon when she comes into the kitchen. Hank nodded. Maybe Mama was replenishing her stock of flour and sugar in that store. Roman sent the googly-eyed emoji. I can follow her if you give me the day off. That forced Hank to admit that he was following Mama, which led to a series of teasing texts. 20 minutes later, Mama emerged from the grocery store with a bright smile and 2 bags of groceries. But instead of heading home, she turned her car toward the center of town. Had she been baking in Tank's kitchen every morning? Impossible. It was nearly 9:30 and Hank was usually in the office by 10 a.m. to receive deliveries and set up for opening. He'd never noticed evidence of cookie making. Mama parked in the small city lot and then carried her groceries down the street. Hank got out and followed from a distance. He was beginning to feel silly, but he was also determined to uncover the truth about his mother's daily habits. Mama stopped to chat with Jazzy, who was unlocking the door to a gift shop. And then she was moving on, hurrying up the stairs a few doors down and disappearing inside. Hank came to a stop in front of the flower girl shop. Leah's place? He walked to the corner and back, waiting. Still no sign of Mama. Had she ordered flowers? Had she gone out the back? Perhaps trying to enter Tank's from the rear entrance? From the street, the shop was perfect for a small cafe. There was room outside the door for a few dining tables. His meeting about the lease was scheduled for Friday. He had mixed feelings about the discussion now that he knew Leah better. But family had to come first. And business was just that, business. Hank checked his watch. Sebastian had offered to show up early to receive deliveries. He should head over there now, just in case Sebastian was delayed. Curiosity kept him lingering on Leah's street. Leah placed a bouquet in the window display. She was talking to someone. Mama? Her son Owen? Hank couldn't stand not knowing. He bounded up the steps and entered the shop. Hello? Leah turned in the doorway to the back room. Hank? What a surprise. She glanced over her shoulder. Who's Hank? A little boy with Leah's blonde hair and bright green eyes charged through the door on sturdy legs. He looks like he needs a cookie. Always. Leah swung Owen into her arms and tickled his tummy. And do you know why? Owen giggled, shaking his head. Because he works too hard. Leah met Hank's gaze. She wore jeans that had dirt smudges on them despite her work apron and a purple t-shirt. "Cookies aren't ready yet." That was Mama's voice. She appeared behind Leah wearing an apron. "You can come back and keep us company while I bake." Leah disappeared into the back room. Hank followed slowly, wondering why the child looked so familiar to him. Then he glanced around, taking in the details of the flower shop. The wrought iron display shelves. The pre-made bouquets and living plants. A small section featuring aromatherapy candles. Leah was using every inch of the room. And it smelled like his grandmother's flower garden, green and sweet. Mama could squeeze 4 tables in here. The thought felt like a betrayal. He moved through the doorway to the back room and was immediately struck with déjà vu. The dedicated space to a child. The small kitchen and abundance of counter space. It was similar in setup to their family restaurant in Reading. And just as she had in Reading, Mama's place was next to the kitchen sink. He felt at home. Hank spared Leah a glance. She watched him warily. "Mama, you're baking here?" "Why?" "You could use our kitchen or your kitchen at the retirement home." "At my apartment, you mean," Mama corrected with just a hint of impatience. She brushed a lock of hair from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Do you know that food imparts smells on other foods? If I baked in Sebastian's kitchen, my cookies would smell like barbecued wings and greasy French fries." "But..." Mama set her hands on the counter's edge. "Be careful with your next words, Henry." Leah snipped stems at a work table. Her son flipped through pages of a book but watched Hank while he did so. Hank sighed. "Do you come here every day?" "Yes." "That's good." It meant she was content in the space. His statement earned him double takes from Mama and Leah. "I mean, I'm glad you found somewhere you feel comfortable. But the baking is surprising. I guess this means you want to open a bakery." "It means no such thing," Mama snapped, still clinging to the counter. "I'm confused." Hank stroked his goatee. "I have no schedule to keep and no menu to make," Mama said, raising her voice. "This is the way I have fun." Fun? Hank had no concept of fun. There was the daily grind and the satisfaction of a profit at the end of the month. Giving away baked goods is fun? "We workaholics rarely have fun," Leah murmured. Hank frowned. "Henry." Mama came to him, taking his face in her floury hands. "She's right. There is more to life than work. There are friendships to be made. Joy to be given. Laughter to be shared. And you find that here? At a flower shop? Instead of with family?" "I think I should be offended," Leah murmured. "I find it here. In the community of Sea Glass Bay." Mama dropped her hands, only to raise them again, this time with a dish towel to wipe at his facial hair, which he imagined was dusted in flour. "This is your home, too. And yet, you hardly know what's outside of the fences bordering your patio dining area." "I'm too busy." No one is too busy to let life pass them by. Mama returned to her mixing bowl. "Now off with you. I imagine your deliveries are about to begin." He nodded numbly and headed for the back door and the alley. Owen ran after him. "Hey, mister. Here. Take this." He held out a small strawberry plant. It had a tiny white strawberry on it. "Mom says plants give smiles. You need one. You need one real bad." Hank stared down at the plant, feeling ashamed that a kid had marked him as needing to smile more and feeling hurt that his mother had marked him as missing out on life. He'd been in the army. He'd traveled the world in uniform. It was time to plan and save for the future. But as he raised his gaze to Leah's, as he saw her soft smile when she looked at her son, he realized that he might be wrong. There might be more to life than work and profits and saving for a rainy day. Rainy days could be lonely if you didn't have someone by your side. Ready to balance your monthly? Paige swung by the flower girl after closing her shop to help Leah with her books. Owen was in the beanbag chair watching a cartoon on Leah's phone. He'd had a play date with Lindy this afternoon and was tuckered out. "Paige, you always make accounting sound so fun." Leah crossed her eyes. "I think it's fun. It's like a puzzle. Everything in its place." Paige took out the stack of papers from a wire inbox on Leah's desk. Her short auburn hair swung across her shoulders as she bent her head to read them. "Do you think we work too hard?" Leah asked, staring at Owen as he yawned. No, Paige didn't look up. "If we lived in mansions and drove expensive cars, my answer would be different. But we don't date." She'd been thinking about Marisol's words about life being too short all day. "And I never take Owen on trips, much less take a day off." Paige set the invoices down and looked at Leah. "Is this because Charlie's wedding is in a few days? Are you lonely?" "Not lonely. Aware." Leah sighed. "I'm 30, divorced, and there are no prospects on the horizon." Her heart wanted to argue that last point, because there was Hank. But Hank was not mine. So this is a byproduct of Charlie's marriage. Paige tucked her short hair behind one ear. "Do you need a pep talk?" "No. I'm practicing my gracious smile." Leah flashed it toward Paige. "What do you think? You look like you're happy to have another woman take Charlie off your hands." Paige chuckled, sorting Leah's invoices into piles. "Hey, have you thought about bringing a date? That dress you bought says you're dateable, not over the hill. Maybe you'll meet someone there." "I told Ashley I was bringing someone." Leah didn't mention that Claire had described him as hot. "It's not going to be pretty if I show up alone." Ashley would never let Leah live it down. "Don't you know someone you can ask?" Paige snapped her fingers. "I know. What about that guy who owns the greenhouse outside of town? He's cute." "What's his name?" "Ray. I think he bats for the other team. Although he'd probably go with her as a favor if he didn't have a boyfriend." "What about Liam?" "The produce manager at the grocery store." Leah shook her head. "I think he's dating his manager, Susan. I should go through my list of clients and find you a date. Or I should just put on my big girl panties and go it alone." Leah sighed. "Would you try a blind date if I found someone?" Paige looked hopeful. Well, how much worse could Paige do than Jazzy and Claire? "Mommy needs someone to eat dinner with," Owen said from his beanbag. "There you have it." Paige grinned. "I have to find you someone now. Can you ask around without using my name?" Leah vowed to tell her circle of friends how each of them had tried to set her up, but only after the wedding. "I am the voice of discretion," Paige assured her. "Doesn't Charlie have Owen on Thursday night?" "Not this week. I can watch Owen Thursday night." Paige waved a hand as if this was nothing. "Why don't I have my guy meet you for coffee at the Salt and Sea Cafe after work?" "You sound like you know a guy." Paige nodded. "I do. I don't know why I didn't think of him before." "Trust me." Leah trusted Paige. It was kismet she didn't trust. "Are you ready for me?" Paige poked her head into Hank's office after the dinner rush. "Is anyone ready for accounting?" Hank shook his head. He'd created piles for Paige to enter into his accounting program. He moved out of her way, taking the small strawberry plant that Owen had given him and putting it on the high windowsill. Paige set down her purse, car keys, and water bottle. "I don't know why numbers get a bad rap." "Because they make most people's head hurt." Hank headed toward the door. "I'll leave you to it. I'll start just as soon as I ask Sebastian something." Paige followed him out the door. "Sebastian? Is he in need of bookkeeping?" "No. But hopefully he's in need of a date." Hank stopped in his tracks. "It couldn't be." "Excuse me." Paige edged past Hank in the narrow hallway. "Hey, Sebastian. Are you still a man without a girlfriend? Sebastian flipped a dish towel over his shoulder. Are you still a woman without a boyfriend? Paige blushed. I've taken myself off the market. Answer, please. Since when did Paige have a flirty relationship with Hank's brother? Was Mama right? Did he have his head so far down in the sand that he wasn't seeing what was going on around him? There's been a lot of talk around here about Leah needing a date, Sebastian said, giving Hank a significant look. Oh gosh. Don't tell anyone that, Paige said quickly. But yeah, she needs a date and I think it'd be best if she had a dry run before the event, you know? Sebastian gave Hank the side eye. Have you asked Hank? No, Paige sliced her hand through the air. Everybody knows that Hank has no time for women. I think I'm offended, Hank murmured, reminded of Leah uttering those same words. Why? Paige pushed her hair behind one ear. Everyone respects what you've done with this dive, Hank. We all know you work hard. He lives to work. Sebastian flipped some burgers. Instead of working to live. Well, maybe I should take Leah on this date. Hank could use it as an opportunity to apologize for barging in on her and Mama this morning. Not that he needed to apologize, okay, maybe he did. But mostly, Hank wanted to grab hold of that electric chemistry they had. Wasn't that something worth working the kinks out of? A date might be good for you both, Paige said slowly, giving Hank a once-over. But if you mess this up, I won't hurt her, if that's what you mean. Hank wasn't sure he could keep that promise, not with a meeting coming up with the owner of Leah's building. Seriously, Hank. I know all your financial secrets. Paige shook her finger at him. And I know how to use them. Seriously? Hank watched Paige walk back to his office. She's kidding, Sebastian reassured him. Haven't you ever talked to her before about anything other than your balance sheet? Paige would never hurt anyone. Right. I knew that. But it made Hank wonder who else in Sea Glass Bay he should know. Other than Leah, of course. Chapter 6. Thursday night, Leah didn't bother changing to meet Paige's assigned date at the Sea and Salt Cafe. The coffee shop didn't frown upon sneakers or t-shirts. And she held out little hope that Paige would find anyone willing to be her wedding date 48 hours before Charlie's wedding. She put her back to the door, laid the daisy on the table's edge and put her chin in her hands. And waited. If ever anyone looked in need of flowers, it's you, flower girl. Hank set a small planter with blue primroses on the table and then dropped into the seat on the other side of the booth. Why so glum? Leah was both flabbergasted and excited. She'd been so frustrated with him at the end of their last date, but she'd since had some insight into his protectiveness, courtesy of Marisol. Paige sent you? Yes. Are you surprised that all your friends think of me when they want to find you a suitable date? He gave her a wry grin. Leah nodded, dropping her gaze to the primroses. I can't remember the last time someone gave me flowers. The vase was a thoughtful choice, too. Blue with white script, Happy Mother's Day. That's just wrong. His voice was deep and sincere. If we were dating for real, I'd give you something every day to show you how much you meant to me. You'd shower me with gifts when you don't approve of your mother giving cookies to her friends. His gaze dropped to her lips. When I said I'd give you something, I didn't mean things that cost money. He reached into his back pocket, withdrew a folded sheet of paper, and handed it to her. She accepted the paper but didn't open it. What's this? Another gift. Of sorts. His gaze was intense. She unfolded the paper and read the bold handwriting. I couldn't stop thinking about you today. Her heart thudded in her chest. She'd been thinking of him, too. Hank. We're off to a rocky start, but we can figure this out. A man stomped up to their table. Oh, you're trying to undercut me now, are you? I should have known. Leah glanced up. Charlie? Leah's ex wasn't scowling at her. He was scowling at Hank. "We have a meeting tomorrow with Bill Tompkins." "What are you doing here with my wife, Hank?" "Ex-wife," Hank said mildly, deceptively casual. Leah could hear the judgment in his tone. "You'd somehow neglected to tell me that detail before you set up this meeting." Charlie ignored him. "Are you trying to cut out the middleman and sublet Leah's shop? Costing me my commission?" No, instead of looking as perplexed as Leah felt, Hank was looking rather guilty. Leah's heart began pounding, but it had nothing to do with her attraction to Hank. "What are you talking about, Charlie?" "Oh, he's good." Charlie leaned on the table. "But he's not good enough to get anything past me. We have a meeting tomorrow, Hank. And in that meeting, I will be paid for the time I put in." He slapped the table, rattling the primroses. "You may think you've backdoored me, but I have Bill on speed dial." He stomped off, reaching for his phone. "Sorry about that." Hank ran a hand over his goatee. "Why do you have a meeting with my landlord?" Leah asked evenly. "And why would Charlie assume you're trying to sublet my flower shop?" "Leah. The first night we met, you wanted to talk about my business." Pieces of their conversation were coming back to her now. "You were quick to judge my ability when it came to being profitable or courageous about expanding." She stared at his face, that handsome face. "And those lips, those lying lips. And when you came inside the shop the other day, you spent a lot of time looking around." "At first I thought," she shook her head. "I thought it was because you were trying to soak in the atmosphere of what I created. But now," her voice thickened with emotion, "now I realize that you were imagining how it might look set up differently as, and here her theory floundered." She stared deep into his eyes, willing him to come clean. "I thought my mother might like to open a restaurant or a bakery there." His words hung between them thicker than any chemistry, because finally his repeated attendance as her date made sense. Leah grabbed her purse, trying to slide out of the booth before tears slid out of her eyes. "I see where this has all been going. Leah. It's all about business to you." She got to her feet. Hank was quick to get to his. "At first, yes. I wanted my mother occupied and safely within range." He followed her toward the door. "Yours was the only building in the neighborhood with a lease coming available." She burst out of the coffee shop, yanking on her sweater. He pressed the primroses and his note into her hands. "It wasn't the way you think. You lied to me. That's what I think. And to your mother, which is worse." Leah stared at the flowers and the note, emotion crowding her chest and clogging her throat. She crumpled his note and threw it at his chest. "Don't come near me. Ever. Again." "Henry, what are you doing here?" Mama opened the door to her apartment and let Hank in. "I just wanted to tell you first." He sank into the big easy chair that used to be his father's. Mama's apartment was filled with the familiar, a hand-carved secretary's desk, a pine end table, a picture of his father in front of the family restaurant. "Who died?" Mama whispered, perching on the arm of his chair. "No one." Hank scrubbed at his goatee and then ran his hand over his hair. He couldn't help but think that he'd screwed up something important tonight with Leah. "Are you sure no one died?" Mama was still whispering. "You look like you're mourning." "I am. I should go. I have to make this right." He stood, hesitating. How was he going to do that when Leah didn't want to see him? Mama stood. And instead of leaving, Hank blurted, "Dad would be disappointed in me." The words cut him inside. "Oh honey. Never." His mother wrapped her arms around him. "He was so proud of you. So proud of you all. You don't know. I thought I was doing the right thing. Why was it so clear now that helping his mother was wrong if it was at the expense of someone else? Someone who was quickly becoming just as important to him." His mother took his hand and led him to the couch. "Tell me, Henry. Tell me everything." And so he did. He told her how in his father's last few days he'd made Hank promise to watch over the woman he'd loved for 40 years so no one would take advantage of her. How Dad had told Hank that Mama wouldn't be happy unless she was running her own place once more. He confessed to consulting with Charlie, a local realtor, to find a place close to Tank's. And how it involved offering the owner of Leah's building a higher monthly lease. Stop right there. Mama stood. She paced to the kitchen and back. And then she crossed her arms and stared down at Hank. Your father loved that restaurant. Hank nodded. And I loved running it with him. Hank nodded again. But the thought of being responsible for such a business again, alone, she shook her head. I want to have the freedom to get up in the morning and cook what I want, bake what I want. Not the same thing every day. And I don't want to be responsible for keeping customers coming in the door so that my employees will be paid. I'm past that. Do you understand? Hank nodded. You put in your time. And he was putting in his. Yes. Mama's arms fell to her sides. Yes. It was wrong of your father to ask such a thing of you. Hank felt the need to defend Dad. He did it out of love. Yes, he did. But his intentions were misplaced. As were yours. She paced to the kitchen and back once more. Hank was gobsmacked by the feeling of respect he had for this woman. His mother was amazing. He'd expected her to rant and rail. He deserved her to. But you, Mama swatted him on top of the head, although not hard. Ow. Hank ducked in case she felt compelled to swat him again. You knew it was wrong to plan a restaurant without consulting me. And you knew it was wrong to try and take Leah's space in such a way, if you had have stopped for more than 2 minutes and thought about the ramifications for her life. Business decisions don't just affect business. They impact families. She crossed her arms over her chest again. Of all the people in town, you asked her ex-husband for advice. I didn't know who he was. He was just someone who came into the bar. Mama leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You would have known if you were part of the community, not just a man concerned with making money. Nay. That stung. A man who keeps his family employed. Mama didn't say anything for a moment, but in that moment, Hank also knew she wasn't letting him off the hook. Why did you choose to buy a business in Sea Glass Bay? The bar was available. The tourism rates were good. And the town seemed, Mama arched her penciled brows. Yes? The town seemed friendly. He rolled his shoulders back, then sighed. Especially the business owners who participate in the weekend market. I knew their happy customers would then spill into my bar after the market closed down. Win-win. You're still too focused on work. Mama sat in the easy chair, running her hands along the arms. The locals are friendly and kind. They've accepted me into their midst. And what have you done? You haven't even sponsored a local soccer team. I know what I have to do. Everything was clear to him now. He stood to go, bending to kiss his mother's cheek. I'll make it right. With Leah. With the community. With Mama. All he needed was time. Henry? He turned at the door. Yes, Mama. You're wrong. His heart sank until she added, your father would be proud of you. Friday morning, Leah hung up the phone with Bill Tompkins, reassured that with a slight increase in rent that her lease would be renewed. She sat with Owen at his child's table in the back of the flower shop. She ruffled his hair. Everything's going to be okay. Even if it didn't feel okay right now. Her heart ached every time she thought of Hank and her blood boiled every time she thought of Charlie. Hank had been motivated by concern for his mother, while her ex had been motivated by bitterness. He'd never supported her business endeavors, particularly when she became one of the popular vendors at the weekend market. But the question remained, what was she going to do about Marisol? There was bound to be tension between them. Her oldest son had tried to displace Leah for his mother. She looked over her shoulder toward the kitchen, which was sparkling clean, just the way Marisol had left it. Mommy. Owen stopped eating waffle squares and picked up his sippy cup. You don't have to be sad. Leah's gaze swung back around to her son. Who says I'm sad? He reached out and smoothed the lines in her forehead. Oh. Owen scampered across the room to the work table. He stretched out his small arms and took the primroses Hank had given her last night. He carried the pot carefully back to her. You smile when you look at flowers. Do I? She didn't feel like smiling. But then Owen draped his arms around her neck and gave her a loving squeeze. That's better. And it was. Leah drew back to look at her beautiful boy, smoothing his soft blonde hair and smiling. You're right. There are things around me that make me smile. Blessings like Owen. Good friends like Paige, Claire, and Jazzy. Suppliers and customers who made it possible for her to create small arrangements that lifted people's spirits. Her heart might feel bruised and her trust broken, but life would go on and get better. Hello? Marisol came into the room tentatively, rather than with her usual confidence. Marisol. Owen ran over to give her a good morning hug. The older woman's gaze sought out Leah's. In it was an apology. And perhaps a plea. The flower girl's kitchen was an important part of Marisol's daily life. She could probably bake in her apartment, but here she was in the center of Sea Glass Bay's community. Leah couldn't turn her away. My son has made many mistakes. Marisol sighed, blinking back tears. She's not going to stay. Leah's heartache deepened. She'd become so fond of Marisol, so used to her being here in the kitchen, adding light and energy and laughter. Are you gonna forgive him? Owen asked Marisol, angling his head up to see her face. Mommy says you have to forgive people and say it's okay. Mommy says sometimes it takes a long time after you say okay for you to feel okay. I'm going to forgive him, Marisol said slowly. But maybe it would be easier if your mother did so as well? A good question. Leah wasn't ready to forgive. She was still hurting and feeling foolish for allowing the spark of attraction to bring down the barriers she'd put around her heart when Charlie left. Is there anything I can do? Marisol asked, eyes watery. I could leave. No. We're going to be fine. All of us. Leah got to her feet and realized it was the truth. She tried smiling, because she was certain it had been hard for Marisol to come here this morning. And good friendships were worth keeping even if they sometimes caused you a bump or two in the road. Her gaze caught on the primroses. We could use some polverons today, don't you think? Marisol crossed the room and brought Leah into a warm hug. I was hoping you'd say that. Chapter 7. Daddy, my clothes look just like yours. Outside the wedding venue, Owen stumbled in his shiny black dress shoes but managed to right himself in time to leap toward Charlie. Leah followed at a slower pace. She wore the midnight revenge dress and high heels she'd borrowed from Paige. Marisol was running her booth today, the last Saturday before Mother's Day weekend. She hadn't seen Hank since the disappointment at the cafe, but it was her ex-husband who was top of mind now. Charlie had avoided her calls, too, and texts, also too, yesterday. She didn't want to have a hard conversation with him on his wedding day, but he'd left her no choice. Owen, you look handsome enough to carry my wedding ring. Charlie swung Owen into his arms and tweaked his nose. Do you think you can do that the way we practiced? No giggles. No questions. No fun. Owen fingered his cowlick with a sigh. Charlie, can I talk to you for a minute? The stern tone rasped against Leah's throat. She was being polite. But she wasn't asking. She came to a stop in front of her ex-husband and crossed her arms over her chest. Owen, can you go give Uncle Carl a hug? I love Uncle Carl. Owen wiggled his feet and was off as soon as Charlie set him on the ground. Charlie stared over her head. Now isn't the time, Leah. Oh, it is the time, Charlie. And let me tell you why. She drew a deep, fortifying breath because the old Leah, the girl who let Charlie snipe at her, needed the strength to stand up for herself once and for all. What you tried to do to me was underhanded. Low. Slimy. Like cheating on your wedding vows. Leah held up a hand when it seemed like he wanted to speak. People in Sea Glass Bay aren't like that. Bill Tompkins was under the assumption that I was going to close up shop and move out of town. You lied to him. And do you know what's worse than a liar? A father who'd put his pride above his son's well-being and happiness. Charlie's gaze dropped to her face. You don't want me to succeed. You never have. But my success gives Owen stability. Kids need stability and love. And they need adults around them who respect others. When Charlie rolled his eyes, Leah raised a finger in the vicinity of his face. All others. Stability, love, and respect are what children need to grow up to be good people. So next time you feel the need to undermine my business or to say something disrespectful to me or about me to Owen, think twice about the example you're setting. Owen stumbled back against Leah's leg. I couldn't find Uncle Carl. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, Pumpkin. Leah knelt down to his level, which was hard considering the high heels and the burn of adrenaline from telling Charlie off. But she managed it because single moms were modern-day superheroes. Now, you be good for your father. And if you need anything, I'll be sitting in the back. Okay. Owen scampered after Charlie, who'd turned his back and walked a few feet away from them. Leah stood and wished that she could just head back out to her car and collapse. It wasn't every day an inconsequential flower girl stood up for herself. Her knees felt like waterlogged stems about to give way. Someone came to stand next to her. She glanced to the right, and then did a double take. Hank? The man next to her resembled Hank. He was tall. His shoulders were broad. And his hair as dark as the ocean at night, covered by a debonair hat. But he'd shaved his goatee. And he was wearing his dress uniform, a black jacket with bright buttons and medals. Lots of colorful medals. He glanced down at her from the corner of his eye. You look lovely, as always. Her palm, of its own volition, traced the hard line of his smooth jaw. You clean up nice. I'm going to miss that facial hair. Leah snatched her hand back. He'd gone behind her back. He'd tried to sabotage everything she'd worked so hard for. And yet, he'd shown up when she needed someone by her side. Hank's mouth quirked up at one corner, but only briefly. I owe you an apology. And also, he blew out a breath. A debt of thanks. Thanks. Hank turned to face her, stiff with military precision and perhaps something else, regret? When my father passed away 6 months ago, my world became a little smaller. I felt the pressure to work harder and to protect those family members I had left, particularly my mother. I made decisions without consulting anyone. Decisions that ruffled the honor this uniform represents. Decisions my family members would have pointed out were ill-advised. Decisions my mother wouldn't be proud of. He sighed and reached for her hand. Instead of an unsettling spark, there was warmth. Hank stared at their hands. Grief and fear of further loss aren't acceptable excuses. I should have done better. I should have been better. And then his dark gaze came up to meet hers. I will strive to be the kind of man a woman like you deserves, whether you give me a second chance or not. Leah's grip tightened on his and she knew in that moment that she was going to forgive him. Not because there was chemistry or that they had a thing or two in common. But because Hank was a man who was willing to admit he'd made a mistake, learn from it, and move forward. He was everything a mother hoped her son would turn out to be. And if she opened her heart, someday he could be hers. You know, I have very high standards, she told him in a slow, low voice that she hoped sounded sultry and confident, like a woman certain of the man in her sights. Smiling, Hank threaded her arm through his and steered them at a leisurely pace toward the venue's double doors. Honey, if you didn't raise the bar every once in a while, I'd be disappointed.